What's going on, family? How y'all doing? Listen, it is Elijah Jordan here, and listen, I wanted to speak to all my chosen ones on today. And a lot of times, chosen ones, when you are not walking in the calling that God has ordained for you, when you are not walking this earth as who He created you to be, and you end up in a counterfeit calling, or you end up working that 9 to 5 job, right? You end up working that factory job, which is, I'm not knocking anybody with a job. I just want to go ahead and first, and make that clear. Because a lot of times we have to work jobs and do things, we don't want to do to make money to survive while we're trying to find our purpose. But a lot of times, chosen ones, when you end up living as someone or doing a job, right? Doing something that you just weren't called to do, a lot of times you end up feeling miserable with your life. And I know that I'm speaking to somebody on here that needed this message and needed this encouragement, because it can get you to a place where you're so depressed and so discouraged about yourself. Because when you don't step into what God actually created you to do, you don't just feel like something is off about your life. You feel empty, you feel agitated, and you feel out of place, which literally it also activates the spirit of displacement and misplacement, which always has you in the wrong environments, around the wrong people, doing the wrong things and fulfilling the wrong calling, which is a whole nother teaching that I'm not gonna, get that deep into on today. But we're gonna get into this message, y'all. So you have to realize that your purpose is not just a hobby. Your purpose is literally your oxygen. It's your reason why. It's your reason for living. It's your motivation, your enthusiasm, your excitement for getting up out of bed every day and continuing to keep on. And so when you're not doing what you were built for, what happens is your spirit starts to suffocate. You can function, you can survive, you can go through the motions of life, but you can't thrive in that place. So your soul knows when you're living beneath your assignment. Your spirit knows when you're out of alignment, and your body knows when you're in the wrong environment. Just like how a trauma response can live in the body. When your soul is off and your spirit man knows, like, hey, I have something, God has something greater that's living within me, right? You have a potential living within you that's untapped, but you're literally living and fulfilling something else. It even shows up in your body, right? It starts to create anxiety, it starts to create stress, it starts to create depression, all these things. And that's why you feel restless and irritated all the time. You're at your 9 to 5 job and you can't focus and you feel miserable. You feel like you're literally going out of your mind at times. You're going crazy. And people at your job think you're off, or you're just lazy, or you're just not a good worker, or you're just not focused. But it's just because you weren't meant to be there. You know what I'm saying? And you feel unfulfilled, disconnected. So what happens is this feeling turns into numbness, because deep down inside, you're angry at life. You're angry at yourself because you feel like, man, maybe I made some mistakes or made some decisions or didn't make some decisions, and that's why I'm in this boat that I'm in. God can reverse and He can flip the script on all of that. But the thing is that you're angry at life, you're depressed, you're miserable, you're empty, but because people still expect you to provide, and because life keeps going, society keeps going, bills keep on racking up, you stay afloat because you have to, but people can tell that you're nonchalant. People can tell that you're not enjoying things like you used to. When you've dealt with this level of emptiness because you're not fulfilling your calling for so long, you start to go numb. Like even certain music that you used to enjoy, like you don't even dance and vibe to the music like you used to, right? You don't even enjoy the things that you used to because your mind is just so obsessed and overwhelmed with, man, all of the things that I'm trying to take care of and survive in life, but I know there's this other life that God has for me and I'm not fulfilling it. But how do I maneuver myself into a way of escaping this life and stepping into the life God truly has for me? Like, how do I realign myself? And so one of the things that's also actually it's actually scientifically, psychologically, and physiologically proven, all right, when you study this stuff, is that when you live off the expectations of other people, or you try to walk this earth becoming something that you were never created to be, it creates not only depression, but it actually burns you out and it exhausts you to where you have no energy, because you're putting all of your energy in something that you weren't created to do. And the reason it exhausts you is because you're not getting the results. So you're putting in the work, but you're not getting the results, because the results are usually only going to come from, right, being in alignment. Because when you're in alignment with who God says that you are, heaven starts to move on your behalf. So you actually get to a place where there's this provision in the kingdom to where you can work less and receive more. That's a kingdom principle that I'll get to on another day, but that's what's so divine and so supernatural about the God that we serve. And so when you come to a place where you're going through the motions of life and you're having to stay afloat and you end up burnt out with no energy, people think that you're off, people think that you're on drugs, they think that you're mentally ill. And to be honest with you, it's not that you're crazy, but being in survival for so long and feeling like you're living a life that wasn't meant for you, it will drive you out of your mind. So it will enhance or it will induce some level of mental illness. And God will allow you to deal with that unease and that unrest until you acknowledge the way that He wants you to do things. So it's not necessarily that you're lazy or that you lack discipline, but it's just misalignment. So imagine, for example, imagine being called to speak on a world stage and speaking to millions of people all over the world, but you're sitting in an office or you're sitting at a factory job, packing boxes. That would make anybody miserable, especially when you're aware of the fact that you have a greater calling in life. So this is the emotional reality of this. When your calling is global, but your environment is small, what happens is your spirit starts to shrink and you start to settle subconsciously because you just want acceptance. So leaving your environment and being courageously who you are, it's too scary for most people. But every time you shift from your old environment and you shift into who you're supposed to be, there's always a turbulence. I talk to you guys about this all the time. There's people that are going to start to persecute you, mock you, treat you like you're the problem. And you have to deal with all of that while being the only one believing in your vision and being okay with looking delusional at first before things actually start to happen and before things actually start to come to fruition. So most people aren't secure enough in themselves and don't love themselves enough to be alone along that journey and lose the things that they've always been attached to. So they never become. They settle. They stay around people that drain them and keep them small because they just need somebody or need the feeling of approval. And this will literally kill you because deep down inside, you're still depressed about it. So as a result, to escape, to numb out the pain, you turn to substance abuse. Eventually, you're going to turn to alcohol. You're going to turn to some type of addiction or bad habit that's only going to make things worse, and it's only going to tear you to pieces and cause you to spiral even more. Because even though you don't want to admit it, it's too painful. All of this is too painful for you to bear without trying to numb it or self-soothe in some type of way, which is where self-sabotaging behavior comes in, right? And the fact of the matter is, too, one of the things that's really difficult to deal with in these situations is that the longer you work in that factory job or the longer you work in that office, the longer that you are living, operating as somebody who you're not, even though you know you were meant to be somebody else, even though you know you were meant for a different life, people have always seen you in this life. People have only seen you in the lower value version of you. So now, when you start to open up your creativity and you start to actually try to fulfill the ideas that God gives you, now people are trying to convince you that you're trying to become something that you were never supposed to be. They're trying to convince you that you're trying to be something you're not. When the whole time, your whole life, you've been trying to be something that you're not. So you see kind of like, I don't know if I want to call it reverse psychology, but this is a tactic, and it's a manipulation tactic of the enemy to try to seduce you or deceive you into believing that you are the lower value version of you, because you'll have everybody who sees you as the lower version of yourself. So they'll deal with you, communicate with you, and handle you as that lower value version of you. And it's designed to reinforce what you believe about yourself to keep you in such a small place. And now anything that you try to do to try to break out of that space, people are going to try to convince you that you're doing too much, that you're a problem, that you're doing the wrong thing, that you're delusional, oh, who do you think you're, man, who you trying to be? That's one of their favorite lines. Man, who you think you are? You trying to be, yeah, who you trying to be? That's a manifestation of a devil working through that person that's trying to get you to stay in a small place and get you to shrink down your light and get you to forfeit the person that you actually always were. The person that you always were. You just operated this earth as somebody else. So when your gift is expressive, but your job is restrictive, your creativity starts to die. All right. Now, one of the things I want you to realize is that you're going to have to go through this season. You're going to have to ask God for the strength and the security in knowing who you are and staying grounded in Him, grounded in His love, to be able to deal with the persecution and the mockery that you're going to deal with when you finally transition into being who God has called you to. All right. But, anyways, moving on. So, when your gift is expressive, y'all, but your job is restrictive, your creativity starts to die because you're focused on surviving, you're focused on fulfilling somebody else's purpose, adding value to somebody else's organization. Well, all of the ideas and the possibilities that God has available to you, those things slowly start to diminish. They end up lost somewhere because you start to forget about it. When your destiny is loud, but your life is quiet, your soul starts to ache. There's like this yearning and this crying out in your spirit, man. You're not miserable because you're ungrateful for what you have, but you're miserable because you're misplaced. And so another thing about the spirit of displacement is when you're operating or you're living as somebody that you're not, or you're operating in your fallen nature, you're going to attract people, places, and things that are going to try to offer you opportunities, offer you help, offer you connection that's actually not meant for you. Ain't that crazy? So the spirit of displacement, it always wants you tied to the wrong things, the wrong covering, the wrong voices, the wrong jobs, and the wrong environments. And it's designed to convince you that's who you are and that's how it'll always be. So therefore, you'll just end up settling for that place. And so the spirit of displacement continues to keep you bound, and therefore it keeps you out of the midst or out of the realms in which opportunities and favor and divine connection will be revealed to you. So you want to pray against the spirit of displacement and pray for God to deal with your internal architecture so that He can realign you and replace you in Jesus' mighty name. So just like a lion in its cage, y'all, right? It's not depressed because it's weak. It's depressed because it's confined. I've used this kind of like as a metaphor to y'all before, I think, but when a lion is taken into captivity, but a lion was meant to hunt. The lion was meant to be in the jungle. He was meant to be the king of the jungle, but he's locked up somewhere. He's going to be depressed. He's going to be miserable. And all of that inside of him, in his mind, that knows I was meant to be in the jungle. I want to hunt. I want to do this. I want to run free. All of that's going to build up inside of him. And it's going to be explosive, right? A build up on top of a build up on top of a build up. So say, for example, once that lion finally gets let out of his cage, if he gets the chance to escape captivity, he's going to be explosive. And I want to decree and declare and prophesy into your life that same build up and that same urge and compelling that you have, knowing that you are in captive, knowing that you are living as somebody that you weren't created to be. I want to pray and decree and declare and prophesy that God is going to give you a way of escaping this captivity, and that your destiny and your gifts, everything, your blessings will be explosive in this next season of your life as you're obedient to what God has called you to. So moving on to the next thing, y'all. Why people turn to numbing behaviors is because when you know deep down, I'm not supposed to be here, but you don't necessarily know how to leave. You're scared to take that first step of faith. You're trying to be responsible. You're trying to please other people. Your soul starts to look for a way of escape. It's actually human nature. That's why when you're not fulfilled by purpose and fulfilled by God Himself, there's always an empty void. And by human nature, you're going to do things to want to self-soothe and overcompensate. And this is pretty much what self-sabotage is. That's when people start drinking, smoking. You start zoning out. You start binging, escaping, shutting down. And what do I mean by zoning out? I don't know if any of y'all have dealt with this, but this is one thing that God has actually still been in the process of delivering me from. To where, because for the past several years, right, along my journey of healing, you guys have seen me along this journey. You guys have seen the growth I've had and where I started 4.5 years ago. But I've gone through the process myself of doing the internal work, realizing my mistakes, my patterns, my dysfunctions, my toxicities, the lies, the reason why my life turned out the way that it did before God started to shift me into purpose. And He's actually still shifting me into purpose. I don't even feel like I've scratched the surface yet. So for all of those watching right now, listen, you haven't even scratched it. There is so much more for you. But be patient, because you will accomplish it. But anyways, going through this journey of trying to find myself, realizing the mistakes that I've made, realizing who I'm supposed to be. It can trigger an initial depression and anger within you because you start to have self-hatred. You start to almost like resent yourself, resent the people around you. You start to beat yourself up about all of the bad decisions and mistakes you made. You start to beat yourself up and have regret. Oh, I should have did this. I should have did that. And so when you're still in the process of transitioning from who you're not to who you're supposed to be, it can cause you to obsess and constantly overthink about it. You're dwelling on the past. You're dwelling on where you feel like you should be right now. You're also constantly obsessing over who you know you're supposed to become. And if you haven't seen the results that you know that you're supposed to have, if you don't have the money, all of that yet, the prosperity, it can drive you nuts in your mind if you allow it to. And this is where you have to allow the Holy Spirit to regulate you and give you patience and know that you can trust God with your times and your seasons. And so my point is that you'll start to overthink. And because you're overthinking, what happens? You end up zoning out. You'll be around you, your kids, your family members, and you'll literally be spacing out. And somebody will try to speak to you, and they're like, Jordan, Jordan, Jordan. And you'll be like, huh? And it's not that you're like necessarily mentally ill or something is wrong with you, but they're like, you're not present in the moment. And it'll steal your joy and your peace and your ability to enjoy the moment. And you have to be careful because it's good to reflect on. I don't want to say look in the past, but it's good to reflect on the past so that you can change it. But you don't want to stay in that place. And it's also good to imagine and to dream big, right? It's also good to think about your purpose continuously. Think about what are the next steps that I have to put in place? What is the next thing that I have to execute along my journey? But you don't want to obsess over it so much to where it drives you out of your mind and it steals your ability to be present for the people who need you and to be present in the moment. Because a lot of times when your joy or your focus is stolen from the present moment, there's something that God wanted to reveal to you in that moment, and there's somebody that you have to be attentive to, a child, a family member, a loved one. And so there's also negative things and side effects that can come from not being present in the moment. So even when you deal with your internal trauma healing, trying to figure out who you are in this life, you want to focus on those things, but don't allow it to overwhelm you. Don't become so obsessed over it to where it brings you into this sunken place and you're not present. Amen. Ask God to regulate you in that place and also give you peace and acceptance with where you are right now. Not that you want to stay in this place, but that you would be at peace and know that everything is going to work out the way that it's supposed to. I hope that could help somebody on today. So all this, going back to what I was talking about, all this numbing, the ways that you cope with your pain, the drinking, smoking, zoning out, the binging, escaping, shutting down, none of this is because you're a bad person, but it's because you're dying inside. Numbing is the symptom, misalignment is the cause. So it's one of the most depressing things that a human being can go through because nothing is more painful than knowing that you're called to more, feeling greatness inside of you, sensing that destiny is pulling you and tugging on your spirit, but living a life that contradicts everything you know you're supposed to be. So it's like emotional suffocation. It's like spiritual suffocation. It's like psychological imprisonment. And you know that you're not meant to be average. You're not meant to be hidden forever. You're not meant to live a life that doesn't match your calling. So when you ignore your purpose, your soul and your spirit literally starts grieving. And the truth is, right, if you don't tap in this season and if you don't ask God who you really are, if some of you watching this right now don't step into what you were actually designed to do, you're going to feel constantly misplaced, misunderstood, unfulfilled, disconnected, depressed, and you don't want to see where that leads you in the next 30, 40 years of your life because you're living a life that doesn't match your internal design. This is why God is pushing you. This is why some of y'all, you feel restless. This is why you can't settle. You can't fake it anymore. Your calling is too loud and your destiny is too strong. Your purpose is too real for you to continue being around counterfeit people and compromising for the opinions of people who don't even like themselves. This is the season where you tap in or you break down. Somebody say, I'm tapping in this season of my life. I'm choosing alignment. I'm choosing purpose. I'm choosing destiny. I'm choosing me. I'm choosing me now. So there comes a moment where you stop running from your pain because you finally realize your pain is actually pointing you forward. When you were numbing, that was survival. That was the numbing kept you alive. But the purpose is what actually causes you to be awakened and for your spirit man to come back alive. And when your spirit man comes back alive and it taps into what God has for you, you start to transcend all of the things that you've been operating in, and all of the things that have been suppressing you and limiting you. And now you're operating at a new level. This is when you start to transcend, y'all. Come on here. This is when you start to move up. So when you step into what you were meant to do, what happens is you're not only your spirit wakes up, but your creativity awakens. And what does that do? It infuses your personhood with more energy. So going back to what I was talking about before, how when you're living a different life or you're living in a false reality, it ends up burning you out. You end up exhausted. When you're doing something that you don't love to do or that you're not passionate about, you get exhausted. It burns you out. But one of the things that I've noticed, especially when God has started to help me find myself and help me fulfill my purpose, is that it gives you a different type of energy. So when most of the issues of life and the pressures would exhaust somebody else and cause them to never have energy, when you're activated in purpose and you wake up and you know, like, hey, I have a reason to be alive today. I have a reason to wake up and work today. It gives you this level of enthusiasm and excitement that actually supernaturally infuses your personhood with more energy to where you don't burn out. It's really a supernatural thing, and it's hard to explain to people who haven't really experienced this. So you start to have joy again because you're living the life you were meant to live. You stop needing to numb yourself because you're no longer living from a need to escape. So why purpose feels like healing is when you start doing what you were designed for, your soul stops suffocating, number one. You can finally breathe again. Everything in you comes alive. Number two, your mind stops fighting itself. You're no longer forcing yourself into environments that contradict your calling and who you were created to be. Number three, your emotions stop collapsing. You're not drained, but you're actually fueled by something real. You're not empty, but you're overflowing. Not just with money, but you're overflowing with love, with connection, with purpose, right? You're overflowing with enthusiasm, with expectation for the future. So I want to wake up every day moving like I'm going somewhere. I want to wake up every day with real motion, not just going through the motions of life, but I'm creating my own motion, not motion that I took from somebody else. Number four, now when you get to this point, what happens is your body stops shutting down. Because you're not dragging yourself through the day anymore, you're waking up with fire and passion. So there's a different grace and a different energy that you have to be able to accomplish the task that you have to. And it doesn't. You might be tired. Purpose can tire you out too, but it's not the same kind of tired. If y'all know what I mean. Number five, your spirit stops grieving because you're finally aligned with God's blueprint. So purpose does the thing and fulfills the thing that numbing could never. 5 things that numbing tries to do, but only purpose can change. I want to give y'all these real quick. Number 1, numbing silences pain, but purpose transforms it. Number 2, numbing disconnects you, purpose reconnects you. Number 3, numbing hides you, but purpose reveals you to the real you. 4, numbing freezes you. It freezes your identity, your growth, your ability to develop, your capacities and stuff like that. But purpose, it frees you. Right, to the point where all of your consciousness, your soul fragments that have been frozen in time, those things are unfrozen and they have the ability and the safety to grow and develop again. It frees your mental and emotional bandwidth and just your ability to learn things and to experience life. All of those things, they come back online. It's a supernatural thing, y'all. Number 5, numbing keeps you stuck, but purpose pulls you forward to where you actually see your life advancing. When you can see your life advancing, that also gives you a different level of energy that pushes you forward.